Ma'am, you need to move to the charity care section. This area is for patients with premium insurance plans only. The words cut through the fluorescent-lit emergency room like a blade. Zara Washington stood frozen, her 8-year-old son Elijah limp in her arms, blood seeping through the makeshift bandage on his forehead. Her Chanel suit, wrinkled from the frantic playground rush, suddenly felt meaningless. Charge nurse Beverly Thompson didn't even glance at the injured child. She waved dismissively toward the overcrowded general waiting area where families sat on plastic chairs.
"But he's bleeding," Zara said quietly, her voice steady despite the rage building in her chest. Beverly's eyes finally lifted, scanning Zara with practiced disdain. "Head wounds look worse than they are, honey. Try some ice." Have you ever held your injured child while someone decided you weren't worthy of basic human dignity? 11:35 p.m. 5 minutes since arrival, Zara shifted Elijah's weight in her arms, feeling the dampness of blood seeping through the towel she'd grabbed from her Tesla. The playground equipment had been wet from the evening rain. One slip, one fall, and now her son's consciousness seemed to drift in and out like a tide. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step back." Beverly's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "You're blocking the pathway for actual emergencies." The word actual hung in the air like smoke. Zara watched Beverly's eyes deliberately avoid looking at Elijah's pale face, at the way his small hand gripped weakly at her jacket sleeve. In the far corner of the waiting room, Deshaun Martinez fumbled with his phone. His own 3-year-old daughter had a fever, and he'd been documenting their 2-hour wait for his wife. The camera was still recording when it captured Beverly's dismissive wave toward the charity section. "Yo, this is crazy," Deshaun muttered into his phone, adjusting the angle. "Lady's got a bleeding kid, and they treating her like—" He caught himself, remembering his audience. 73 people were watching his Facebook live stream. "Y'all seeing this?" Beverly called toward the security desk. "We need crowd control at the main entrance. Uninsured patient causing a disruption." The guard who approached was young, maybe 25, with the eager stride of someone still proving himself. His nameplate read, J. Rodriguez. Zara noted it automatically, filing away details the way she'd learned in countless boardroom negotiations. "What seems to be the problem here?" Rodriguez asked, his hand resting casually on his radio. "No problem at all," Zara said, her voice carrying a strange calm that made Rodriguez pause. "My son needs medical attention. I'm simply asking to see a triage nurse." Beverly stepped closer, lowering her voice, but not quite enough. "These people always think their kids are special emergencies. Single mothers. You know how it is." The assumption hit like a physical blow. Single mother. As if Elijah's father wasn't in Dubai closing a $200 million infrastructure deal. As if the wedding ring on Zara's finger was invisible. As if her worth as a mother could be measured by Beverly's narrow assumptions. Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably. Even he seemed to recognize that something felt wrong about the interaction. "Maybe we should just check the boy out real quick," he suggested. Beverly's face hardened. "Officer Rodriguez, we have protocols. Insurance verification, intake forms, triage priorities. I've been doing this for 15 years. I know an emergency when I see one." She finally looked directly at Elijah, but her expression remained unmoved. "Head bumps bleed a lot. Looks scary, but it's usually nothing. Some ice, maybe a Band-Aid from the vending area." 11:42 p.m. Friday night trauma rush building. Through the automatic doors, an ambulance siren wailed closer. The overhead speakers crackled. "Trauma 1, incoming GSW, ETA 3 minutes." The emergency room staff moved with practiced urgency, preparing for the gunshot victim. Zara understood. Real emergencies took priority. She'd built her company understanding triage, resource allocation, life and death decisions. But watching Beverly's eyes, she saw something else entirely. Not medical judgment. something colder. A woman in yoga pants and a Harvard sweatshirt entered with her teenage son, his wrist clearly swollen from what looked like a sports injury. Beverly immediately approached them with a warm smile. "Oh, honey, let's get you right to triage. Sports injuries can be tricky." The contrast was so stark that Deshawn's camera automatically followed it. His viewer count had jumped to 127, and the comments were rolling fast. "Are you seeing this shit?" "Same nurse, totally different energy. This is exactly what my sister went through. Document everything, bro." Beverly escorted the White family past Zara without a glance. The message was clear. Some pain mattered more than others. Zara felt Elijah's grip on her jacket loosen slightly. His eyes, when they opened, seemed unfocused. The nausea he'd complained about in the car was getting worse. Classic concussion symptoms she'd researched frantically during the drive. "Mommy, the lights are too bright," he whispered. She instinctively turned her body to shield him from the harsh fluorescence, a movement that Beverly interpreted as defiance. "Ma'am, you cannot just stand there. I'm going to have to ask security to escort you to the appropriate waiting area." Rodriguez looked between them, clearly uncomfortable with escalating the situation. But Beverly's authority outranked his discretion. Zara's phone buzzed against her hip. The caller ID read "Board Chair Emergency." She declined the call. Another buzz. "Legal team, urgent." Also declined. In the pocket of her jacket, barely visible, the corner of a business card caught the light. Platinum American Express Centurion card, the weight of it as familiar as breathing. But Beverly's eyes never dropped that low. She saw only what she expected to see. "Look," Beverly said, her voice taking on the tone of forced patience. "I understand you're worried, but head injuries are common in children. If you're really concerned, the county hospital has a pediatric unit. They might be more suited to your insurance situation." The suggestion was polite poison. County hospital meant hours more driving, overwhelmed staff, longer waits. For a potential concussion, time mattered. Deshawn's stream had hit 194 viewers. Someone in the comments was identifying the hospital, posting links to patient advocacy websites. The digital witness was growing, but slowly. Zara studied Beverly's face, memorizing every detail. The practiced smile that never reached her eyes, the way she positioned her body to create barriers, the unconscious signals that said, "You don't belong here." "I understand your protocols," Zara said quietly. "But my son needs help. That's all that should matter right now." Beverly's response was a sigh of theatrical frustration. "Security, please escort this woman to the general waiting area. She's being disruptive to patient care." The first real escalation. The line had been crossed. 11:47 p.m., 12 minutes since arrival. Rodriguez hesitated, his training warring with his instincts. "Ma'am, if you could just cooperate and move to the general waiting area, we can avoid any further issues." "What issues?" Zara's voice remained level, but there was steel underneath. "I'm holding my injured son. I haven't raised my voice or made threats. What exactly is the issue here?" The question hung in the air, forcing Rodriguez to confront the uncomfortable truth. There was no issue except Beverly's determination to make one. Before he could respond, nursing supervisor Janet Mills arrived, summoned by Beverly's radio call. Mills was a compact woman in her 50s, her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun that matched her expression. She surveyed the scene with the practiced eye of someone accustomed to managing difficult situations. "What's the situation here?" Mills asked, directing her question to Beverly rather than Zara. "Uninsured patient demanding immediate triage despite our standard protocols," Beverly reported, her tone suggesting this was a common problem. "She's refusing to follow intake procedures." Mills nodded, accepting Beverly's version without question. The solidarity was automatic, institutional. 2 veteran nurses against 1 demanding mother. Deshawn's Facebook live stream caught this exchange perfectly. His viewer count had jumped to 287, and someone had started screen recording the stream. The comments were getting heated. "This is discrimination, plain and simple. Where is this? Someone needs to call the hospital administration. My cousin's a nurse. This ain't protocol. Tag the local news stations." But social media outrage, Zara knew, moved slowly. Hospital bureaucracy moved even slower. Elijah's condition couldn't wait for either. 11:52 p.m. 17 minutes since arrival, Mills approached with the confidence of someone wielding institutional authority. "Ma'am, I'm Janet Mills, night nursing supervisor. I understand you're concerned about your son, but we have procedures that ensure fair treatment for all patients." The word fair was particularly galling. Zara watched Mills' eyes perform the same dismissive scan that Beverly had done, taking in her appearance, making assumptions, reaching conclusions that had nothing to do with medicine. "Your procedures seem to prioritize insurance status over medical need," Zara replied. "My son has a head injury. He's showing signs of concussion. That should be the only relevant fact." Mills's smile was patronizing. "I understand your frustration, but head injuries in children are very common. Our triage nurses are trained to assess true emergencies. If this were serious, we'd already have him in treatment." The circular logic was maddening. They wouldn't assess him because they'd decided it wasn't serious. They'd decided it wasn't serious because they wouldn't assess him. Across the waiting room, the white family with the sports injury was already being wheeled back to an examination room. The teenager was alert, talking, laughing at something his mother said. No blood, no altered consciousness, no urgency except the kind that came with being seen as belonging. "Mommy," Elijah's voice was smaller now. "I think I'm going to be sick." Nausea. Another concussion symptom that should have triggered immediate medical attention. Instead, Mills interpreted it as evidence of maternal anxiety. "Children often feel sick when their parents are stressed," she explained to Zara with infuriating patience. "Maybe if you could calm down, he'd feel better too." The victim blaming was so smooth, so practiced, that Zara almost admired its efficiency. Make the mother responsible for both the injury and the reaction to medical neglect. 12:03 a.m. 28 minutes since arrival. Zara's phone had been buzzing continuously. The caller ID showed increasingly urgent contacts: crisis management, board emergency line, legal, priority. Each declined call felt like a small act of rebellion against the system that would open every door for CEO Zara Washington while slamming them shut for just another black mother Zara. Deshawn was whispering commentary into his phone, trying to stay unnoticed. "This is Metro General Hospital, y'all. Friday night, almost midnight. Been recording for 20 minutes now. This lady's kid is bleeding from his head, and they won't even look at him." His stream had attracted 423 viewers. Someone in the comments had identified themselves as a local journalist. Another claimed to be calling the hospital's patient advocacy line, but these digital allies felt distant, ineffective against the immediate power dynamics playing out in real time. Night Administrator Doug Patterson appeared, summoned by Mills' escalation. He was a tired-looking man in his 40s, clearly irritated at being pulled from whatever crisis he'd been managing. His approach was all business efficiency. "What's the situation?" he asked Mills, again ignoring Zara's presence. "Uninsured patient demanding priority treatment," Mills reported, becoming increasingly agitated despite our explanations of protocol. Patterson finally looked at Zara, his assessment quick and dismissive. Single black mother, expensive-looking but probably fake designer clothes, demanding special treatment. The narrative wrote itself in his mind. "Ma'am," he said, his tone suggesting this conversation was already over. "Metro General follows strict triage protocols based on medical necessity, not patient demands. If you're not satisfied with our care, you're free to seek treatment elsewhere." The suggestion was both polite and brutal. "Leave. Take your bleeding child and leave. Find somewhere else to be someone else's problem." 12:15 a.m., 40 minutes since arrival. Elijah's grip on Zara's jacket had weakened noticeably. His eyes, when they opened, took longer to focus. Classic signs of deteriorating brain function that any first-year medical student should recognize. "My son is getting worse," Zara said, her voice carrying a new urgency. "Look at him! Actually look at him!" Patterson glanced at Elijah with practiced disinterest. Children often become drowsy when they're tired. It's past midnight. The willful blindness was staggering. They would not see what they didn't want to see, would not acknowledge what didn't fit their predetermined narrative. Behind them, another family entered, this time a Latino couple with their elderly father who was clutching his chest and struggling to breathe. The response was immediate. Wheelchair, oxygen, urgent escort to cardiac triage. The contrast wasn't lost on Deshawn's growing audience. "Check this out," he narrated quietly. "Different family, different treatment. Same hospital, same night." The comments exploded. "Call the news now. This is lawsuit material. Someone get this to social media influencers. Screenshot everything." But Zara couldn't wait for viral justice. Elijah's condition was deteriorating in real time. Mills suggested something that crossed every line. "Ma'am, if you're really convinced this is an emergency, perhaps you should call 911. The ambulance paramedics can assess whether transport to our trauma center is necessary. Call 911. From inside the emergency room. To get treatment out of the emergency room where they already were." The absurdity was so complete it felt like satire. "You want me to call an ambulance to bring my son to the hospital where we're already standing?" Zara asked. "Our protocols exist for a reason," Patterson replied stiffly. "Emergency transport cases receive automatic triage priority." The system had twisted itself into such bureaucratic knots that getting help required leaving to ask for help to return for help. It was procedural violence disguised as policy. Rodriguez, who had been watching this exchange with growing discomfort, finally spoke up. "Maybe we could just have a doctor take a quick look? Kid does seem pretty out of it." Beverly's reaction was swift and sharp. "Officer Rodriguez, medical decisions are made by medical professionals, not security personnel." The reprimand stung, and Rodriguez stepped back, properly chastened. Any sympathy from the system's foot soldiers was quickly crushed by its supervisors. 12:18 a.m. 43 minutes since arrival, Zara felt Elijah's body grow heavier in her arms. Not the comfortable weight of a child falling asleep, but the concerning limpness of someone losing the fight to stay conscious. She looked around the emergency room with new eyes, seeing it for what it truly was. Not a place of healing, but a gatekeeper institution that decided who deserved care based on who deserved respect. Deshawn's stream had reached 534 viewers. Someone had started a hashtag #MetroGeneralShame. Local Twitter was beginning to light up, but social media justice moved at internet speed while medical emergencies moved at life and death speed. Time was running out. For Elijah. For the illusion that fair treatment was just a matter of asking politely. For the comfortable fiction that being right was enough. 12:22 a.m. 47 minutes since arrival, Zara Washington had built a $2.3 billion company by knowing exactly when to reveal her cards. Too early, and people dismissed you. Too late, and the damage was already done. The timing had to be perfect. She looked down at Elijah, whose eyes were now struggling to stay open. His breathing was shallow, his skin pale under the harsh hospital lights. This was the moment. "Mr. Patterson," Zara said, her voice carrying a new quality that made him pause mid-sentence. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." She reached into her jacket pocket with deliberate slowness, pulling out a business card, not the platinum credit card they'd glimpsed earlier, something far more powerful. Patterson took the card reflexively, glanced at it, and froze. The embossed letters seemed to burn in the fluorescent light. Zara Washington, Chief Executive Officer, Washington Enterprises. The blood drained from Patterson's face as the implications hit him like a freight train. Washington Enterprises.
The same Washington Enterprises that had financed Metro General's $89 million expansion 3 years ago. The same company that held the majority stake in MedCorp Solutions, Metro General's parent company. Beverly, still oblivious to the shift, continued her lecture about protocol. Sir, regardless of what business card she's carrying, we have procedures that— Shut up. Patterson's voice came out as a strangled whisper. Just shut up. Mills looked between them, confused by Patterson's sudden pallor. Doug, what's wrong? Patterson's hands were trembling as he held the business card. He'd seen this name in quarterly reports, board meeting minutes, financial statements that determined his hospital's future. Zara Washington wasn't just some CEO. She was their CEO's boss. She was everyone's boss. 12:25 a.m. 50 minutes since arrival, Deshawn's camera caught the moment of recognition perfectly. Patterson's transformation from dismissive bureaucrat to terrified employee was so dramatic that even the live stream viewers could sense something massive had shifted. Oh shit, Deshawn whispered into his phone. Y'all, something just happened. The administrator dude looks like he's about to throw up. The viewer count had climbed to 672. Someone in the comments had started researching Washington Enterprises, posting links to Forbes articles about Zara's rise to power, her company's healthcare investments, her reputation for systematically dismantling institutional barriers. Patterson fumbled for his radio, his voice cracking. Security. Disregard previous calls to the ER. Situation is resolved. What situation? Rodriguez asked, still confused by the sudden change in atmosphere. There is no situation, Patterson snapped, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. Zara watched the dominoes fall with the calm precision of someone who'd orchestrated this reveal 1,000 times in boardrooms around the world. The power dynamics were shifting in real time, years of institutional arrogance collapsing under the weight of economic reality. Ms. Washington, Patterson began, his voice barely above a whisper. If we had known. That's exactly the problem, Mr. Patterson. Zara's tone remained steady, but there was steel underneath that hadn't been there before. My son's medical needs shouldn't depend on who his mother happens to be. Beverly was still processing, her face cycling through confusion, recognition, and dawning horror. She'd spent 47 minutes treating the owner of her hospital like a charity case. Mills stepped forward, her nursing supervisor authority suddenly feeling very small. Ms. Washington, I apologize for any misunderstanding, but our triage protocols are designed to ensure— Your protocols, Zara interrupted gently, just spent 47 minutes denying medical care to a child with a traumatic brain injury. While you debated insurance status, my son's condition deteriorated. She looked around the emergency room with new authority, seeing the same space but from an entirely different position of power. How many other families have you treated this way? How many other children have suffered while you played gatekeeper? 12:28 a.m. 53 minutes since arrival, Patterson was frantically calculating damage control. His career, his hospital's funding, the entire institutional structure that had seemed so solid 5 minutes ago now felt like sand shifting beneath his feet. We need to get Elijah to trauma immediately, he said, signaling desperately to the nearest nurse. Full workup, CT scan, whatever he needs. Now you see the emergency? Zara asked. What changed? His symptoms are the same? His injuries are the same? The only thing that's different is your perception of who deserves care. The question hung in the air like an accusation. Beverly and Mills exchanged glances, both realizing they were standing at the epicenter of what was about to become a very public disaster. Deshawn's stream had exploded to over 1,000 viewers. The comments were rolling too fast to read, she's the CEO. Beverly about to lose her job. This is about to go viral. Screen record everything. Someone call Channel 7 News. But Zara wasn't finished. She had more cards to play. Mr. Patterson, I'm curious about something. Could you pull up the patient satisfaction scores for Metro General's emergency department? Patterson's confusion was evident. What? Now? Humor me. With shaking hands, Patterson pulled out his tablet, accessing the hospital's internal database. Our overall satisfaction rating is 3.2 out of 5. And broken down by demographic? The silence stretched as Patterson navigated through screens he clearly didn't want to explore. These numbers are... Share them. White patients rate us 4.1 out of 5. Black patients... His voice dropped to a whisper. 2.3 out of 5. Hispanic patients, 2.7. The numbers hung in the air like a medical examiner's report. Institutional racism quantified, documented, undeniable. 12:35 a.m. 1 hour since arrival. A trauma team finally arrived, rushing Elijah away on a gurney that should have been there an hour ago. Zara watched them disappear through the double doors, her composed exterior cracking slightly as maternal fear broke through executive armor. He'll be fine, Mills offered weakly, the first genuine emotion she'd shown all night. Will he? Zara asked. Or will there be permanent damage because of the delay? Will my 8-year-old son pay the price for your assumptions about who deserves immediate care? The legal implications were sinking in. Delayed treatment, documented discrimination, a pattern of bias that had just been exposed by the worst possible victim, someone with the resources to do something about it. Patterson's radio crackled. Mr. Patterson, we need you in the cardiac unit. Incoming MI. Handle it, he said weakly, unable to leave the expanding crater of his career. Beverly had gone silent. Her earlier authority evaporated. She stood frozen, waiting for the axe to fall. Zara pulled out her phone, ignoring the dozen missed calls from her board, her legal team, her crisis management firm. Instead, she opened her own social media accounts. 2.3 million followers on Instagram, 1.8 million on Twitter, a platform that reached directly into the homes and hearts of people who'd experienced exactly what had just happened to her. What are you doing? Patterson asked, panic creeping into his voice. Telling my story, Zara replied simply. She began typing. Tonight, my son was denied emergency medical care at Metro General Hospital, not because of his injuries, but because of the color of our skin. This is America. This is healthcare. This is the reality that too many of our children face. Watch what happens when institutions think no one is looking. She attached Deshawn's live stream link, giving his documentation official amplification. 12:41 a.m. 1 hour, 6 minutes since arrival, Patterson watched in real time as Zara's post began gathering likes, shares, comments. Her follower count meant this wouldn't stay contained to late-night social media. By morning, it would be national news. Please, he said, his voice breaking. We can fix this. We can make this right. Can you? Zara asked. Can you undo the hour my son spent in pain while you debated his worthiness? Can you give back the brain cells that may have died while Beverly explained why head injuries look worse than they are? Mills stepped forward, perhaps sensing this was her last chance to salvage something. Ms. Washington, I've been a nurse for 23 years. This wasn't about... Wasn't about what? Zara's voice was soft, but the question was surgical. Say it. Tell me what this wasn't about. Mills couldn't. Because they all knew exactly what it had been about. The words that couldn't be spoken in polite company but had shaped every interaction, every assumption, every decision to see problems instead of patients. Rodriguez, who had been silently watching this entire exchange, finally spoke up. I tried to suggest we just check the kid out. They shut me down. It was a small act of moral courage, but one that Zara noted. In her company, she'd learned to identify people who could grow, who could change, who had conscience buried under institutional pressure. Beverly finally found her voice. I was following protocol. I was doing my job. Your job,
Zara replied, is supposed to be caring for sick children. When did it become gatekeeping access to medical care based on who you think deserves it? 12:47 a.m., 1 hour, 12 minutes since arrival, Dr. Sarah Bennett, the trauma attending, emerged from the treatment area. Her expression was professional but concerned. Ms. Washington, your son has a moderate concussion with some brain swelling. We're going to keep him for observation, but he should make a full recovery. The relief was overwhelming, but it came with a bitter aftertaste. Should make a full recovery meant there had been real danger. The delay hadn't been harmless bureaucracy. It had been genuine medical negligence. Doctor, Zara asked, would earlier treatment have made a difference? Dr. Bennett glanced at Patterson, then back at Zara. Medical ethics warred with institutional loyalty. Any head injury should be evaluated immediately. Time always matters with brain trauma. The admission hung in the air like a smoking gun. Zara looked around the emergency room one more time. At Beverly, who was staring at the floor. At Mills, who was calculating her own liability. At Patterson, who was watching his career end in real time. Gentlemen? Ladies. Her voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected thousands of lives. We need to talk. 12:52 a.m., Conference Room B. The sterile meeting room felt like a tribunal. Patterson sat across from Zara, flanked by Beverly and Mills, both looking like defendants awaiting sentencing. Hospital CEO Dr. Maria Santos had arrived 20 minutes ago, her suit hastily thrown over pajamas, her expression cycling between damage control and genuine horror. Zara's legal team had materialized with the efficiency of people accustomed to 2 a.m. crisis calls. Corporate attorney James Morrison spread documents across the table like evidence exhibits. The hospital's own legal counsel, awakened from sleep, looked overwhelmed by the scope of what they were facing. Let's establish the facts, Morrison began, his voice carrying the precision of someone who'd destroyed careers with paperwork. Ms. Washington and her son arrived at 11:30 p.m. with clear symptoms of traumatic brain injury. For 1 hour and 12 minutes, they were denied appropriate medical assessment based on what exactly? Patterson's mouth opened and closed without sound. How could he explain the unexplainable? That they'd assumed wealth based on skin color? That they'd prioritized insurance verification over medical evaluation? That their entire system was designed to filter out people who looked exactly like their hospital's majority owner? Based on protocol, Beverly said weakly, her last attempt at institutional defense. Morrison slid a document across the table. This is Metro General's official patient care policy, Section 3.2. All patients presenting with potential neurological trauma shall receive immediate triage assessment regardless of insurance status or ability to pay. Signed by Dr. Santos 3 years ago. Santos winced. Her own policy, violated by her own staff, captured on social media, witnessed by over 2,000 people who were still sharing the footage across multiple platforms. There seems to have been a breakdown in implementation, she said carefully. A breakdown? Zara's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of someone who'd spent decades turning institutional failures into teachable moments. Dr. Santos, your staff spent over an hour debating whether my injured child deserved medical care. That's not a breakdown. That's the system working exactly as designed. 1:15 a.m. The numbers game. Morrison opened his laptop, connecting it to the room's presentation screen. Financial data filled the wall like a medical scan showing metastatic disease. Washington Enterprises currently holds $312 million in Metro General debt financing, he announced. Additionally, we own 67% of MedCorp Solutions, your parent company. Equipment leases, pharmaceutical contracts, construction bonds, all flow through companies in our portfolio. The numbers weren't threats. They were simply facts. But facts with teeth. Santos studied the screen, calculating quickly. Mr. Morrison, surely we can resolve this without what? Without acknowledging that your hospital systematically provides substandard care to minority patients? without addressing the 2.3 out of 5 satisfaction rating among black families, without confronting the fact that a traumatic brain injury was treated as a paperwork problem? Patterson finally found his voice. We've had some training issues, but our staff isn't racist, Zara finished. Mr. Patterson, in the past 6 months, how many formal discrimination complaints has Metro General received? Patterson's silence was answer enough. Morrison consulted his notes. 14 complaints. 0 resulted in disciplinary action. All were classified as misunderstandings or communication issues, including 3 cases where minority children experienced delayed emergency care. The pattern was undeniable. This wasn't Beverly having a bad night. This was institutional culture. Mills spoke up for the first time since entering the conference room. Ms. Washington, I understand you're upset, but nursing is a demanding job. We make split-second decisions under enormous pressure. Nurse Mills, Zara interrupted. I run a company with 47,000 employees across 6 countries. I understand pressure. What I don't understand is how that pressure consistently leads to the same demographic receiving inferior care. 1:28 a.m. The deeper reveal Morrison clicked to the next slide. Corporate organizational charts filled the screen like a family tree of institutional control. Washington Enterprises doesn't just finance Metro General, he explained. We own the medical equipment company that leases your MRI machines. We hold majority stakes in 3 pharmaceutical distributors that supply your medications. Our real estate division owns the land under 2 of your satellite clinics. Santos felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. This wasn't just about one night's discrimination. This was about the entire economic ecosystem that kept her hospital functioning. Additionally, Morrison continued, we're currently evaluating Metro General for inclusion in our new Community Healthcare Excellence Initiative. That's a $89 million investment program designed to reward institutions that demonstrate measurable commitment to equitable care. The carrot and stick were now clearly visible. 89 million reasons to change or face the consequences of staying the same. Beverly, who had been silent since the conference room door closed, finally cracked. Look, maybe I was having a rough night. Friday shifts are crazy, we're understaffed, and sometimes you make assumptions. But I'm not a bad person. I've been doing this job for 15 years. Nurse Thompson, Zara said, using Beverly's full name for the first time. I don't think you're evil. I think you're human. But your assumptions nearly cost my son his cognitive function. Your rough night could have been his permanent brain damage. The personal cost, stated simply, cut through all the institutional deflection. Santos leaned forward, her CEO instincts kicking in. What do you want from us, Ms. Washington? How do we make this right? 1:35 a.m. The ultimatum Zara had been waiting for that question. She reached into her briefcase, pulling out a tablet loaded with a presentation she'd been developing for months, long before tonight's incident had made it personal. 6 months ago, Washington Enterprises began developing a comprehensive healthcare equity protocol, she began, her voice taking on the tone of someone presenting to a board of directors. We've studied bias in patient care across 47 medical facilities. Tonight's experience simply confirmed what the data already showed. She clicked through slides showing statistical analysis, patient outcome correlations, demographic treatment patterns. Here's what's going to happen. Metro General will implement immediate bias intervention protocols. Every patient interaction will be monitored through our AI-powered analysis system. Staff will undergo 120 hours of comprehensive cultural competency training. Patient satisfaction scores will be tracked and reported monthly, broken down by demographic categories. Santos nodded quickly. That sounds reasonable. I'm not finished. Zara's tone brooked no interruption. Beverly Thompson and Doug Patterson will be terminated immediately. Any staff member who participated in tonight's incident will be suspended pending full review. You'll hire a chief diversity officer with real authority over hiring, training, and disciplinary decisions. The room fell silent. These weren't suggestions. They were requirements. Morrison added the legal framework. Additionally, Metro General will participate in our healthcare bias research study. Anonymous data on treatment patterns, outcome disparities, and patient satisfaction will be shared with academic researchers studying systemic healthcare discrimination. And if we refuse? Santos asked, though she already knew the answer. Zara's response was matter-of-fact. Washington Enterprises will immediately call all outstanding loans, terminate all equipment leases, and redirect our healthcare investments to institutions that share our commitment to equitable care. Metro General will have 60 days to find alternative financing for $312 million in debt obligations. 1:42 a.m. The choice Santos looked around the room at the faces of her staff. Beverly was crying quietly. Patterson stared at the table, his career already over. Mills was calculating whether she could salvage her position by cooperating fully. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. Accept transformation, or face institutional death. Dr. Santos, Zara said, her voice softening slightly. I'm not trying to destroy Metro General. I'm trying to save it. Your hospital serves one of the most diverse communities in the state. You can either evolve to serve all of them equally, or you can continue to fail the families who need you most. Santos picked up a pen, her hand trembling slightly. Where do I sign? Morrison slid the implementation agreement across the table. Page 12 requires your signature. Pages 1 through 11 outline the specific requirements, timelines, and accountability measures. As Santos signed, Zara felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Victory shouldn't require corporate warfare. Healthcare equity shouldn't depend on economic leverage. But sometimes institutional change only happened when institutions faced existential pressure. 1:47 a.m. Implementation begins. The bias monitoring system goes live Monday morning, Morrison announced. Training begins Tuesday. Chief Diversity Officer job posting goes up Wednesday. First monthly satisfaction report is due in 30 days. Santos nodded numbly. What about tonight? The publicity? That depends, Zara said, on how quickly and thoroughly you implement these changes. The public is watching now. They'll judge you based on what happens next, not what happened before. She stood, gathering her materials. My son is going to be fine. Other children might not be so lucky. Make sure there aren't any other children. 3 months later, 7:30 a.m. staff meeting, Dr. Maria Santos stood before her transformed emergency department, watching the morning briefing with something approaching pride. The changes had been swift, comprehensive, and surprisingly effective. Patient satisfaction scores for February, announced Dr. Keisha Williams, Metro General's new Chief Diversity Officer. Overall rating, 4.6 out of 5. More importantly, our demographic breakdown shows equity across all patient populations for the first time in hospital history. The numbers told the story of institutional transformation. Black patients now rated their care at 4.4 out of 5, Hispanic patients at 4.3. The gap that had persisted for decades had essentially disappeared. Beverly Thompson was gone, terminated that same night. Patterson had been reassigned to hospital maintenance, a humbling but necessary consequence. Mills had survived by embracing the changes, becoming one of the most effective advocates for the new protocols. The AI monitoring system flagged 3 potential bias incidents this month, Dr. Williams continued. All were addressed immediately through additional training. No formal complaints were filed. The technology worked. Patients' interactions were analyzed in real time, looking for patterns in wait times, tone of voice, treatment decisions. Staff knew they were being watched, and more importantly, they knew the standards were being enforced. Morning rounds, pediatric unit nurse Rodriguez, formerly security guard Rodriguez, checked on 8-year-old Marcus Bennett, who'd arrived the previous night with a head injury remarkably similar to Elijah's 3 months earlier. The difference was striking. Immediate triage, comprehensive assessment, family treated with dignity and respect. Rodriguez had requested transfer to nursing after completing an accelerated training program funded by Washington Enterprises Healthcare Education Initiative. His moral courage during the Washington incident had earned him a second chance at a career where he could actually help people. "How's Marcus doing?" Dr. Williams asked, reviewing the boy's chart. "Full recovery expected," Rodriguez replied. "Family's been impressed with the care. Mom said it was the best emergency room experience she's ever had." The transformation wasn't just policy changes. It was cultural evolution, one interaction at a time. Administrative offices, 10 a.m. Santos reviewed the quarterly financial report with cautious optimism. The feared exodus of patients hadn't materialized. Instead, community trust had increased dramatically. Word spread quickly in neighborhoods that had historically avoided Metro General unless absolutely necessary. Emergency department visits were up 23%. Patient referrals had increased 31%. Most surprisingly, staff retention had improved significantly. Nurses who'd previously dreaded their shifts now took pride in working at a hospital known for equitable care. The Washington Enterprises Healthcare Excellence Award comes with $89 million in infrastructure improvements, Santos told her board. New pediatric wing, upgraded trauma center, expanded community outreach programs. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The same night that nearly destroyed careers had ultimately saved the institution. Community impact. Afternoon Deshaun Martinez had become an unlikely advocate for healthcare justice. His Facebook livestream that night had been viewed over 2.3 million times. Local news stations had picked up the story. National healthcare policy experts had cited Metro General as a model for rapid institutional change. "People ask me if I plan to record that night," Deshaun told a community meeting at the local library. "Truth is, I was just documenting our wait time. But that video showed something that happens every day in emergency rooms across America. The difference is, this time someone with power was on the receiving end." He'd used his newfound platform to document positive changes at Metro General, showing how one mother's refusal to accept discrimination had created ripple effects throughout the community. 6 months later, the Washington Foundation. Zara stood in the foundation's new headquarters, reviewing applications for the Elijah's Promise Healthcare Equity Grants. 27 hospitals across 3 states had applied for funding to implement bias intervention programs modeled on Metro General's success. Elijah, fully recovered and now 9 years old, was helping sort through thank you letters from families who'd experienced improved care at participating hospitals. "Mom, look at this one," he said, holding up a drawing from a 6-year-old girl whose broken arm had been treated immediately at a hospital in Atlanta. She drew herself with a doctor who looks like her. Representation mattered. Dignity mattered. The simple expectation that medical care should be colorblind had become revolutionary change. The real-life stories continue. Metro General's transformation had inspired broader systemic changes. State health officials were developing bias monitoring requirements for all emergency departments. Medical schools were revising curricula to include comprehensive equity training. Insurance companies were tracking patient satisfaction by demographics as part of provider evaluations. But the most powerful changes were individual. Families who had previously delayed seeking medical care now arrived early when children showed symptoms. Community trust in healthcare institutions was slowly being rebuilt, one respectful interaction at a time. These touching stories of institutional change demonstrated that progress was possible when people with power used it responsibly. When Black stories of discrimination became catalysts for justice rather than just documentation of injustice. The measurement of success, Dr. Williams published Metro General's data in the New England Journal of Medicine. Other hospitals were replicating the model. Healthcare conferences featured panels on bias intervention. What had started as one mother's nightmare had become a template for industry-wide reform. The ultimate success metric wasn't financial. It was simpler. Could a Black child receive the same emergency care as a white child? At Metro General, and increasingly at hospitals across the region,
The answer was finally yes. 1 year later, the legacy Elijah Washington, now 10, spoke confidently to the packed auditorium at the National Healthcare Equity Summit. His mother watched from the wings as her son shared his story with hospital administrators, policymakers, and advocates from across the country. "That night changed everything," Elijah said, his voice clear and strong. "Not just for me, but for kids who look like me in emergency rooms everywhere. My mom always says the most powerful medicine isn't in a pharmacy. It's refusing to accept unacceptable treatment." The audience of healthcare professionals rose in sustained applause. Many had implemented Elijah protocols in their own institutions. Others had traveled here specifically to learn from Metro General's transformation. Dr. Santos, now a national speaker on healthcare equity, presented the summit's final statistics. Discrimination incidents across participating hospitals had dropped 78% in 18 months. Patient satisfaction among minority families had increased from an average of 2.4 to 4.3 out of 5. Most importantly, health outcomes had improved as families felt safer seeking early medical intervention. The ripple effect Zara's story had become a case study taught in business schools, medical schools, and public policy programs. Not as an example of corporate revenge, but as a demonstration of how individual courage could catalyst systemic change when combined with strategic thinking and sustained commitment. Beverly Thompson had completed a comprehensive bias rehabilitation program and now worked as a patient advocate at a community clinic, helping other healthcare workers recognize their unconscious prejudices. Her transformation reminded everyone that people could change when given the opportunity and support. Deshaun Martinez had parlayed his viral documentation into a career as a healthcare justice journalist, investigating institutional bias across multiple industries. His original live stream was now archived in the Smithsonian's collection of social justice documentation. The expanding movement, what started as one mother's fight for her son's medical care, had grown into a national movement. The Washington standards for healthcare equity were being adopted voluntarily by hospital systems who recognized that dignified care wasn't just morally right, it was good business. Families who had previously avoided seeking medical care were returning to institutions they now trusted. Emergency departments reported increased early intervention visits, leading to better health outcomes and reduced long-term costs. The economic case for equity was becoming undeniable. The continuing story. But the most profound changes were invisible, immeasurable moments happening daily in examination rooms across America. Black mothers no longer had to steel themselves for battles just to get their children basic medical attention. Latino families could arrive at emergency rooms expecting dignity rather than dismissal. These quiet victories represented the true success of institutional transformation. Your voice matters. These real-life stories remind us that change is possible when we refuse to accept the unacceptable. Every documented incident of bias, every shared experience of discrimination, every person who speaks up contributes to the pressure that forces institutions to evolve. Have you witnessed healthcare discrimination? Have your children been treated differently because of their race, ethnicity, or economic status? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience could be the catalyst for change that another family desperately needs. Document everything. Film when appropriate. Speak up when you see injustice. Your voice adds to a chorus that institutions can no longer ignore. Subscribe to Black Voices Speak for more stories of ordinary people creating extraordinary change. Ring that notification bell because every story shared builds the momentum for the equity our communities deserve. Together, we transform touching stories of pain into powerful stories of progress. Together, we ensure that every child, regardless of zip code or skin color, receives the dignity and care they deserve. The conversation continues. Add your voice.